His method effectively detected minute traces of the poison. As a result, the test now bore his name. She had to determine how the poison had been administered. With a ruler, Felicity opened the mouth of the deceased Michael Spencer. Arsenic carried the smell of almonds, though not fresh ones, rather something reminiscent of stale decay. There was no almond smell in the dead man's mouth. "He didn't ingest the poison?" she asked Hobson. The coroner found arsenic in his system, but not in his throat or stomach. She proceeded to sniff the rest of the body. This was where she smelled the lavender and vanilla on the deceased's shirt and coat. Hobson stood and watched. Though her first visit to the coroner's office had been met with resistance and unfriendliness, today the clerk had opened the door with a smile. She and Hobson had become acquainted during her first-ever investigation, which she now referred to as the King Arthur affair. She'd had to initially bribe him to allow her to inspect one of the victims of the killer, who had been preoccupied with the Arthurian legend. When she'd returned to the mortuary for other investigations, she'd had to pay only a small remuneration to the clerk. Felicity had now come to like Hobson, who knew everything in the world about cats, since he owned two. "Hobson, come here, please," Felicity said. "Take a whiff of the deceased's hands and tell me what you smell." Hobson took a long sniff. "Beeswax, paraffin, and peppermint." "Excellent, Mr. Hobson. Just what I thought. I suspect the smell came from an ointment because the victim suffered from arthritis. Notice how the knuckles on his fingers are oversized." "Mean anything?" the clerk said. "Not at this time, but the investigation is young." Michael Spencer had become the third suspected victim of the deadly widow, the title bestowed by the Illustrated Police News. Not necessarily a creative title, but one most accurate. Although sensational and often lurid, the penny newspaper made its living reporting stories about crime, many of them without a resolution. Regularly, Felicity combed its pages, as well as those of the Times, seeking out such cases. The unsolved, the baffling, these cases had become her vocation. Felicity Margaret Carrol of Surrey was one of the wealthiest heiresses in England. She had inherited the magnificent Carrol Manor and thousands of acres of land, not to mention a cotton mill, shipping line, and thousands of pounds from investments. But instead of using the riches to attract a husband, as most young ladies in their early 20s would have done, she had found other ways to spend her money. She had increased wages for those who worked at her family's businesses, and started a foundation to help children in the poverty-laden East End. But solving the unsolvable and pursuing justice were her main occupation. Felicity had an utter distaste for the usual role young ladies played in their Victorian society and was determined to forge a path in the opposite direction. Tapping her vast financial resources to aid in her investigations, she utilized all her intelligence, scientific talents, and exceptional memory to recall anything she had read to help bring justice to those who might otherwise get none. She had so much in life, and she wanted to give to those who'd had everything taken from them by murder. She gave back by tracking down their killers. This had been her passion for the past year. She received tremendous satisfaction in making sure the people who thought they could get away with homicide ended up with their hands bound by the metal handcuffs of the Metropolitan Police. To her dismay, there were many cases where the killer remained free, including Bessie Denner. Felicity had read about Denner in the Illustrated Police News. The story had even earned a spot on the cover. In an obvious ploy to sell more issues, the penny magazine's drawing depicted an overly beautiful young woman sitting in her chair darning a sock in front of a fire in a quaint parlour. Smiling, she looked over at a nondescript older man sipping tea allegedly containing arsenic. The magazine drawing did show the woman was missing a little finger on her right hand. That detail had been based on testimony from friends of the victims who had seen the woman accompanying her soon-to-be-dead spouses. The police reported that the wife had become the chief suspect because she'd departed with the victim's money and valuables.